7 years. That's how long I spent being the perfect stepmother. Packing lunches, attending every game, nursing them through fevers, and loving them like they were my own. But it only took 7 words to destroy everything. She'll never be our real mom anyway. But let me start from the beginning, because this story isn't just about one devastating moment. It's about 7 years of building a life that I thought was real, only to discover I was living in a fantasy. The aroma of buttermilk pancakes filled the kitchen as steam rose from the griddle. 7 years of morning routines had perfected this dance. Lunchboxes lined up like soldiers, backpacks checked twice, permission slips signed in purple ink because that's what made Abigail smile. The woman flipping pancakes had calloused hands from countless scraped knees bandaged, homework sessions that stretched past midnight, and soccer cleats scrubbed clean in the utility sink. "Helen, you're burning them again," came a sleepy voice from the doorway. Eddie, now 15, stood rubbing his eyes, his voice deeper than she remembered from last month. Behind him shuffled Abigail, 11, clutching her worn stuffed elephant, and Jay, 8, already dressed in his soccer uniform, though practice wasn't until afternoon. "Just the way you like them, crispy edges," Helen replied, sliding golden pancakes onto plates decorated with cartoon characters that had seen better days. The morning chaos erupted as usual. Abigail couldn't find her science project, Jay insisted his cleats were still dirty, and Eddie complained about everything while secretly helping his younger siblings. Helen orchestrated it all with practiced precision, her husband Derek already gone to his construction job, leaving her to manage 3 children who carried his DNA but had grown to depend on her steady presence. She watched them eat, memorizing their faces. Eddie's stubborn cowlick that refused taming, Abigail's gap-toothed grin when she laughed at Jay's silly jokes, Jay's concentrated expression as he cut his pancakes into perfect squares. These children had become her world, their laughter her soundtrack, their needs her priority. But families built on shifting ground often crumble when you least expect it. The parent-teacher conferences stretched longer than usual. Mrs. Madison, Abigail's teacher, praised her academic improvement while Mr. Simpson expressed concerns about Eddie's attitude. Jay's coach wanted to discuss his potential for advanced leagues. Helen took notes, scheduled follow-ups, and promised to address every concern with the dedication that had defined her parenting for 7 years. Walking to her car, she overheard familiar voices from the playground. Eddie, Abigail, and Jay sat on the monkey bars, their conversation carrying on the evening breeze. "I hate when she acts like she knows everything about us," Eddie said, his voice sharp with adolescent frustration. "She just cares about us," Abigail replied softly. "She's not our real mom though," Jay added matter-of-factly. "She can't tell us what to do forever." Helen's feet froze to the asphalt. Her breath caught in her throat as Eddie continued, "Exactly. She'll never be our real mom. When I'm 18, I'm done pretending she matters." The words hit like physical blows. 7 years of sleepless nights when they were sick, 7 years of celebrating their victories and comforting their defeats, 7 years of loving them as fiercely as any biological mother could, reduced to pretending she matters. Abigail's voice wavered, "But she loves us." "So what?" Eddie shot back. "Love doesn't make her our real family. Dad just married her. She's basically like a really involved babysitter who lives with us." The cruel laughter that followed shattered something deep inside Helen's chest. She stood there, invisible behind the school building, as the children she'd sacrificed everything for dismissed her as temporary help. The wedding ring on her finger suddenly felt heavy, meaningless. Her hands trembled as she walked back to the car, their words echoing in her mind. That night, Helen stared at the ceiling while Derek snored beside her. The children's words replayed endlessly, each repetition cutting deeper. She thought about the college fund she'd contributed to from her part-time job earnings, the vacation days she'd used for their school events, the dreams she'd deferred to prioritize their needs. Morning came with the usual chaos, but everything felt different. When Eddie complained about breakfast, she heard his real voice saying she'd never be his real mom. When Abigail hugged her goodbye, she wondered if it was genuine or just habit. Jay's request for help with homework felt like an obligation rather than trust. "You're quiet today," Derek mentioned, grabbing his lunch from the counter. "Just tired," she replied, the lie tasting bitter. He kissed her forehead absently, already focused on his phone. "Don't forget Eddie has that dentist appointment Thursday. And Abigail needs new cleats." More responsibilities, more tasks for the woman who was just pretending to matter. Helen nodded, her smile feeling like a mask that had grown too heavy to wear. At work, her colleague Nina noticed her distraction. "Girl, you look like you haven't slept in weeks." "The kids keep me busy," Helen said automatically. "Those aren't your kids though, right? They're your stepkids." The casual distinction felt like salt in an open wound. Everyone saw it, everyone except her. She'd been living in a fantasy where love conquered biology, where dedication created unbreakable bonds. But even her closest friend saw the invisible line that separated her from true motherhood. That evening, she found herself standing in the doorway of each child's room, watching them sleep. Their faces, peaceful in slumber, looked so innocent. But she couldn't unhear their words or unsee the truth they'd revealed. Something fundamental had shifted and there was no going back. The suitcase lay open on the bed like a wound. Helen's hands shook as she folded clothes that had witnessed 7 years of family life. The blouse stained with Jay's chocolate milk, the sweater Abigail had picked out as a birthday gift, the dress she'd worn to Eddie's middle school graduation. Each item carried memories that now felt like lies. Her phone buzzed with a text from Derek. "Working late tonight. Kids have homework. Thanks, babe." Thanks. As if she were doing him a favor by caring for the children she'd loved as her own. The casual assumption that she'd handle everything, be everything, sacrifice everything, while remaining forever outside the inner circle of their real family. Helen walked through the house she'd helped make a home. The walls displayed family photos where she stood slightly apart, the loving stepmother who complemented their unit but never truly belonged to it. Awards and certificates she'd celebrated, report cards she'd stressed over, artwork she'd proudly displayed. All evidence of a life she'd poured herself into while remaining eternally secondary. In the kitchen, she wrote a note with the same purple ink she'd used for permission slips. "Derek, I overheard the kids yesterday. They made it clear I'll never be their real mom, that I'm basically an involved babysitter. They're right. I've been pretending for 7 years that love was enough to make a family, but biology and blood create bonds I'll never have. They need their real family now. You're their father. Figure it out. Don't contact me until you've learned what it means to actually parent your children alone. Maybe then you'll understand what I've been doing all these years. Helen." She placed it where Derek would find it, next to the carefully organized weekly schedule she'd maintained, the emergency contact lists, the medication reminders, and the meal plans that kept their lives running smoothly. Walking out felt like tearing away pieces of her soul, but staying would destroy what remained. Derek arrived home to chaos that would have been comical if it weren't so devastating. Jay sat crying at the kitchen table, his math homework scattered and tear-stained. Abigail rummaged through cabinets looking for dinner ingredients she didn't know how to use. Eddie stood in the doorway, his usual attitude replaced by genuine confusion. "Where's Helen?" Derek asked, noting the unusual silence from the woman who typically greeted him with updates about everyone's day. "We don't know," Eddie said, his voice smaller than usual. "She wasn't here when we got home." That's when Derek found the note. He read it 3 times, each pass making the words more real, more damning. The children gathered around him, sensing crisis in his expression. "What does it say, Dad?" Abigail asked, her voice trembling. Derek looked at his children, really looked at them, and saw what Helen had been seeing all along. Eddie's bravado hiding deep insecurity, Abigail's people-pleasing masking her need for stability, Jay's constant motion concealing anxiety about not measuring up. These complex, beautiful, damaged children had been Helen's full-time job while he focused on providing financially. "She's gone," he said simply. "Gone where?" Jay asked. "Away." "Because?" Derek struggled with how much truth to share. "Because you hurt her feelings very badly, and I haven't been appreciating everything she does for us." Eddie paled. "She hurt us yesterday?" The weight of their words suddenly crashed down on all of them. Eddie remembered his cruel laughter. Abigail recalled not defending Helen strongly enough. Jay realized his casual dismissal of her love. "We have to get her back," Abigail whispered. But Derek was staring at the organized lists Helen had left behind, finally understanding the invisible architecture that had held their family together. Without her, they were just 4 people who shared a house. The first week without Helen revealed the true scope of her contributions. Derek burned breakfast while trying to pack lunches, forgot about Jay's soccer practice, and discovered that Eddie had been failing English for months, something Helen would have addressed immediately. "Dad, we're out of milk," Abigail announced, standing before an empty refrigerator. Derek realized he'd never been grocery shopping alone with the kids. Helen had handled meal planning, nutrition requirements, and everyone's preferences with mathematical precision. At the store, they filled the cart with frozen pizzas and cereal, spending twice what Helen's carefully planned trips cost while providing half the nutrition. Jay had a meltdown in the cereal aisle. "I want the kind Helen buys. She knows which one I like." "She's not here," Eddie snapped, but his anger sounded more like grief. "When is she coming back?" Abigail asked for the 20th time. Derek didn't have an answer because Helen hadn't contacted him despite his increasingly desperate voicemails. Her sister Tamara finally answered his calls. "She's staying with me, and no, you can't talk to her," Tamara said firmly. "That woman sacrificed 7 years of her life for your children, and they threw it back in her face. She's devastated. They're just kids. Kids old enough to know better." "Eddie is 15, Derek." He knew exactly how much those words would hurt. The call ended with Tamara's warning, "Figure out how to be their father before you worry about getting your wife back." That night, Derek sat at the kitchen table surrounded by incomplete homework, unpaid bills, and permission slips he didn't understand. The house felt cavernous without Helen's presence filling the spaces between them. His children needed their stepmother back, but first he needed to learn who his children really were. Eddie's English teacher, Ms. Rodriguez, requested an urgent meeting. Sitting across from her in the classroom where parent-teacher conferences used to be Helen's domain, Derek felt like an imposter. "Eddie has been struggling all semester," Ms. Rodriguez explained. "His grades have dropped significantly, and his attitude toward authority has become problematic. I've been trying to reach someone at home for weeks." Derek's stomach sank. "I never got any calls. We've been calling the number on file. Mrs. Washington always handled these situations." Mrs. Washington. Even the school recognized Helen as the primary parent. Derek realized he wasn't listed as an emergency contact for his own children because Helen had always been the one to respond. "There's more," Ms. Rodriguez continued. "Eddie wrote an essay about family that, well, it's concerning." She handed him a paper titled, "The Person I Took for Granted." Derek's hands trembled as he read Eddie's words. "I said she would never be my real mom, but she was more real than anyone. She knew I was scared about high school before I admitted it. She helped me with algebra every night even though she hated math. She made my favorite cookies when I was sad about not making varsity. Real moms are supposed to love you no matter what, but I found out that even fake moms can stop loving you if you hurt them enough. I don't know how to fix what I broke, but I would do anything to take back what I said." The essay continued for 2 pages, detailing every way Helen had shown love while Eddie had taken her for granted. It ended with a plea, "If anyone knows how to make someone forgive you for being the worst person alive, please tell me. I lost the best mom I ever had because I was too stupid to know she was real." Derek left the school with tears in his eyes and a new understanding of the damage his family had inflicted on the woman who'd held them together. Abigail's behavior at school deteriorated rapidly. Her teacher, Mrs. Patterson, called Derek with concerns about his daughter's emotional state. "She's been having crying spells during class," Mrs. Patterson explained. "When I asked what was wrong, she said her mom left because she didn't defend her enough. I'm confused. I thought her mother lived out of state." "Her stepmother," Derek clarified, the distinction feeling more painful each time he said it. "Stepmother?" Abigail always talked about her as just mom. She seemed very close to her. That evening, Derek found Abigail in her room, surrounded by photos of her and Helen. Birthday parties, school events, bedtime stories. 7 years of memories that Abigail was desperately trying to preserve. "I was supposed to stick up for her," Abigail sobbed. "She always sticks up for me. When Tommy Morrison called me ugly, she went to the school. When I was scared of the dark, she bought me nightlights and stayed until I fell asleep. She fought for me, but I didn't fight for her." "You're 11, baby girl. You didn't know." "Yes, I did." Abigail's voice cracked. "I knew Eddie was being mean. I knew Jay was being silly. But I didn't want them to be mad at me, so I let them say horrible things about the best person in our family." She showed him a journal she'd been keeping, filled with entries about missing Helen. One entry read, "Day 10 without mom. Dad burned dinner again. Nobody knew I had a school presentation today. I got an A, but there was nobody to tell who would be proud of me the right way. Dad says, good job. But Mom would have asked about every detail and then called Grandma to brag about me. I don't know how to be a kid without her. Derek realized that Helen hadn't just been their caretaker. She'd been their emotional center, their translator, their advocate in a world that often felt too big and harsh for children to navigate alone. Jay's anxiety manifested in ways that terrified Derek. The 8-year-old who'd been confident and outgoing became clingy and fearful. He refused to sleep alone, waking up screaming from nightmares where everyone he loved disappeared. I want Mom, Jay sobbed during another sleepless night. I want my real mom. Your real mom, Derek started then stopped. Jay wasn't talking about his biological mother who'd left when he was 2. He was talking about Helen, the only mother he'd ever really known. Dr. Sarah Gallimore, the family therapist Derek finally consulted, was direct in her assessment. Jay is experiencing abandonment trauma compounded by guilt. At 8, he doesn't understand the complexity of adult relationships, but he knows his words contributed to losing his primary attachment figure. Primary attachment figure? The person who provided his emotional security, daily care, and unconditional love. From what you've described, that was your wife, not you. The harsh truth hit like a physical blow. Derek had been a provider, not a parent. He'd left the emotional labor to Helen while taking credit for the stable home they'd built together. The children need intensive therapy, Dr. Gallimore continued, but more importantly, they need to understand the consequences of their actions. This isn't about a stepmother leaving. This is about losing the person who functioned as their psychological parent. That night, Derek called his own mother, desperate for guidance. Son, she said after hearing the story, you married a woman who loved your children like they came from her own body, and you let them treat her like hired help. Now you're all paying the price for taking a blessing for granted. How do I fix this, Mom? First, you learn to be the father she was trying to help you become. Then maybe if you're very lucky, she'll consider forgiving you all. The breaking point came when Jay was hospitalized after a panic attack at school. 8 years old and hyperventilating because his teacher mentioned Mother's Day projects. He'd scared his classmates and staff with the intensity of his breakdown. I killed my mom, Jay whispered to the pediatric nurse, his small voice carrying the weight of unbearable guilt. I said she wasn't real and now she's gone forever. Derek sat beside the hospital bed, holding his son's tiny hand while machines monitored his vitals. The attending physician, Dr. Williams, spoke frankly about Jay's condition. Children his age don't typically experience panic attacks of this severity unless there's been significant trauma, she explained. What he's describing sounds like complicated grief, mourning someone who's still alive but no longer accessible to him. Eddie and Abigail arrived with Derek's mother, their faces pale with fear. Seeing their little brother hooked up to monitors was the wake-up call they all needed. This is my fault, Eddie said, his 15-year-old composure finally cracking. I started it. I said those things because I was mad about her making rules, but I didn't mean for this to happen. We all said things, Abigail added, tears streaming down her face. But Jay's the baby. He just copied us. For the first time since Helen left, the family was united in their shared responsibility for the crisis they'd created. They'd broken more than Helen's heart. They'd shattered the foundation of trust and security that had made their family functional. Dr. Williams observed their grief with professional concern. The child keeps asking for someone named Helen. Given his level of distress, I'd recommend including her in his treatment plan if possible. She won't talk to us, Derek admitted. Then you need to find a way to make her listen, Dr. Williams replied. Because that little boy is grieving the loss of his mother, and traditional therapy won't be enough if he can't process this abandonment with the person he's mourning. Tamara opened her apartment door to find Derek, Eddie, Abigail, and Jay standing in the hallway, all looking like they'd been through a war. Jay clutched a drawing he'd made in the hospital, a family portrait with a conspicuous empty space where Helen should have been. She doesn't want to see you, Tamara said firmly. Please, Derek begged. Jay's in therapy because of panic attacks. Eddie is failing school. Abigail hasn't stopped crying in 3 weeks. We're not here to ask her to come back. We're here to let her see what she meant to us so maybe she can heal too. Through the doorway they could see Helen sitting on the couch, her back to them. She'd lost weight, her shoulders hunched with the kind of grief that changes a person's posture permanently. 5 minutes. Tamara relented. Helen didn't turn around when they entered, but her shoulders tensed. Jay broke free from Derek's hand and ran to her, climbing onto the couch like he'd done 1,000 times before. "Mom, I'm sorry," he sobbed into her shoulder. "I didn't mean it. You're the realest mom in the whole world." Helen's composure shattered. She wrapped her arms around Jay, tears flowing freely for the first time since she'd left. "Baby, you didn't do anything wrong. You're just 8 years old." "But I said you weren't real," Jay hiccuped. "And then you disappeared like you really weren't real." Eddie stepped forward, his teenage pride crumbling. "Helen, I wrote you a letter. I've written you 50 letters, but they're all terrible because there aren't words for how sorry I am." He handed her a single sheet of paper. Through her tears, Helen read his latest attempt. "You taught me how to shave because Dad was too embarrassed. You helped me ask Jessica to the dance because you knew I was scared. You never missed a game even when you were sick. You made me into a better person every single day, and I threw it all away because I was angry about stupid stuff that doesn't matter. I know I can't take it back, but I need you to know that you were the best mom I could have asked for, even if I was too dumb to see it." The room fell silent except for the sound of collective weeping. Helen looked at each of them, really looked, and saw the devastation her absence had caused. But she also saw something else. Genuine remorse, growth, and the kind of desperation that comes from losing something irreplaceable. "I heard everything you said that day," she finally spoke, her voice hoarse from crying. "But what hurt most wasn't that you didn't see me as your real mom. It was that I realized I'd been fooling myself for 7 years, thinking love was enough to make a family." Abigail climbed onto the couch beside Jay. "But it is enough, Mom. Love is the only thing that makes families real. Lots of people have the same DNA but don't love each other. You chose to love us every day. And we chose to hurt you," Eddie added. "But that doesn't mean the love wasn't real. It just means we were too stupid and selfish to protect it." Derek finally spoke, his voice thick with emotion. "Helen, I failed you in every way a husband can fail a wife. I took your love for granted, I let you carry the entire emotional weight of our family, and I never defended your role as their mother. You deserved better from all of us. The house doesn't work without you," Abigail said simply. "We don't work without you. We tried, but we're not a family when you're gone. We're just sad people who live in the same place." Jay pulled back to look at Helen's face. "Are you still our mom even if we were mean?" The question hung in the air like a prayer. Helen looked into his innocent eyes and saw the truth she'd been running from. These children were hers, they be damned. The love was real, even if it was complicated, even if it came with pain. "I never stopped being your mom," she whispered. "But being a mom means teaching you that actions have consequences. Saying cruel things to people who love you has consequences. What do we have to do to fix it?" Eddie asked. Helen looked at Derek. "Your father needs to learn how to be a parent, not just a provider. And you 3 need to understand that families are built on respect, not just love." 6 months later, the Washington family looked different. Derek had learned to braid Abigail's hair, help with homework, and remember important dates without Helen's prompting. Eddie spoke respectfully to authority figures and had brought his grades up to honor roll. Abigail had found her voice, defending others the way she wished she'd defended Helen. Jay still had occasional anxiety, but he'd learned coping strategies that didn't involve losing the people he loved. Helen had returned home, but not as the same woman who'd left. She set boundaries, demanded respect, and refused to be taken for granted. The family meetings they held every Sunday weren't just about schedules. They were about ensuring everyone felt heard and valued. "I want to legally adopt you 3, she announced one evening at dinner. The room went silent. After 7 years of unofficial motherhood, she was asking to make it legal. "But we hurt you," Abigail said quietly. "Families hurt each other sometimes," Helen replied. "But real families also forgive, learn, and grow stronger. I want us to be a real family, legally, emotionally, and forever." Eddie was the first to speak. "I would be honored to be your son officially." "Me too," Abigail and Jay chorused. Derek reached across the table to take her hand. "I should have encouraged this years ago. You've been their mother since the day we married." That night, as they tucked the children into bed together, a nightly routine they'd re-established, Jay asked the question that still worried him sometimes. "Mom, are you ever going to leave us again?" Helen knelt beside his bed and looked into his eyes. Baby, I left because I thought you didn't need me. But I learned something important. Families don't work because they're perfect. They work because they choose each other every single day, even when it's hard. Even when we mess up? Especially when we mess up. That's when families prove they're real. As she turned off his light, Jay's sleepy voice followed her. I'm glad you're our real mom, Mom. Walking down the hallway past family photos that now included her prominently, Helen smiled. She'd learned that being a real mother had nothing to do with biology and everything to do with showing up, setting boundaries, and loving fiercely enough to demand the respect that love deserved. The adoption papers on her nightstand would make it official, but her heart had known the truth all along. Some families are born, others are built, but the strongest ones are forged through weathering storms together and choosing to rebuild rather than walk away. Thanks for listening. Give us a like if you like the video and share with us in the comments what you think about this lovely tale. We always enjoy reading your comments.